And now it's time for everything that you've been waiting for. We're going to swap over the front end starting right now. So today is day one of the front end Nova swap, transfer, whatever you want to call it. And I want to do something a little bit different than what we've done in previous videos, because you guys said you want to know how long does it take to do this, how long does it take to do that. So I'm going to keep a timer on the whiteboard over there, and you guys are going to be able to keep up and keep along. We'll get you an update at the start and end of the videos, or whatever seems like the best interest. So look forward to that. And then also I want to break this up into segments. So we're going to do bits and pieces at a time so you can kind of keep track, and maybe there's some parts of this build that you're not going to want to do where you can save some time, like building really high-end radiator hoses and custom fabricating some different pieces. So we'll get you a quick update right now on where we're at with everything, and then we're going to start the clock. Here we are, pretty much bone stock 6-cylinder. That's coming out, 6-liter LS going in. We still need to spec out the motor and take that to the machine shop. We'll talk about that in a couple of videos. 3-speed on the column coming out for an I Did It. That's going to get switched over. Brake bias already installed. Tandem Wilwood master cylinders done and done. Stock cooling system completely coming out. We've got an aluminum radiator and some other custom goodies. Battery already relocated to the trunk, so this just comes out, and we're going to put a bulkhead in the firewall up here. Vintage air replacing the factory system, so that's going to get sealed up. That's going to get sealed up. Custom bulkhead and then battery connections going to go right there. Speedway G-Comp front subframe, Speedway G-Comp inner fenders, Speedway G-Comp headers, and fender brackets. Toyota MR2 custom electronic power steering system. So we've got a power rack from this G-Comp kit. We're supposed to put a power steering pump right here. That's not going to happen. We're going to get this thing set up and hooked up so it's going to do everything we want it to do, even when the engine isn't running. LS1 test block. It's got a crack number 7, so this is really just for lining up the bolt holes and everything else. This was $50 in comparison to the plastic test blocks, like $300. So that's gonna be a big no for me, dog. Factory F-body accessories. We're gonna run the F-body, so the 99 and up Camaro style spacing. LS1 Speedway G-Comp motor mount brackets. Prothane motor mounts, low profile mount. QA1 shocks, cheap Chinese coils. CPP C5 conversion hubs. C5 brakes. Aftermarket Chinese super cheap C5 hub bearings. I think that's an Earl's oil filter relocate. This is like a swap meet item that I picked up. There's the part number if you want to look it up. We've already tacked on our tow hooks, so we got to finish welding those. We've already tacked on our brake hose tabs, so we got to finish welding those on. These are not the cylinder heads we're going to run. These are some junk 317s that have been all wallered out. We've got a set of 243s up on the shelf that we're going to slap on the 6-liter in this pile of crap over here. We've got a really old expired bell housing that we're going to put on. It's going to be fine for street use, but we won't be able to do any real competitive stuff without a current certification. And we'll go over a few other custom pieces and other doodads that we have to pick up along the way, but I think you get the idea. So let's get started. And go! Oh yeah, and I almost forgot to mention the most important thing about this build. Air conditioning. So we're draining the oil and draining the coolant at the same time. See if we can get all the fluids out of this thing so we can start ripping it apart. 7/8 on the drain plug, standard wrench on the radiator drain. 9/16 for this downpipe bolt. So now we're going to finish getting the exhaust off. You might remember this from a couple videos ago. Going to be gone for good now. Ho ho ho! First part's coming off. Scrap bin. Well, this is taking entirely way too long, so we're gonna pop the cap off. Speed things up a little bit. Who needs this anyway? While that continues to drain, I'm gonna pop this clutch linkage off. So we pop loose this jam nut. It's a 9/16, and then we're gonna unthread this a little ways to where she just comes right off. And the next thing we're gonna do is start taking these linkages off. They're just on here a little more than finger tight, like a real light lock nut, so using a pair of slip joints isn't gonna hurt anything. So we got these out of the way, went ahead and put the hardware back on here nice and snug so we don't lose them. We see how worn out these bushings and stuff are, which is why I had some shifter issues when I was driving it around. If you're gonna put this back together, you're probably gonna want to replace these. Next thing we're gonna do is pop off this speedo. It's on here just a little bit more than finger tight. There you go. We're gonna leave that in the case so that Dom gets this in a few weeks. He's gonna be all ready to go. And the next thing we're gonna do is pop a drive shaft out and put in this plug. I got 9/16 12 point, but remember this is all aftermarket strange rear end parts. Look back to the old video, maybe it says what that was. Probably not. Good luck. More parts for sale. Pro tip, put some electrical tape or whatever you got on the end of this, and make sure you don't mix up your U-joint caps. When these come from the factory, they are set for each one. You would think that they would all be the same, and they are probably pretty close, but the manufacturers all say don't mix your U-joint caps. And yes, I know this is in backwards. I don't care. Remember, always put your stuff back where it came from so that you don't lose it later when you put this back together. And for right now, we're going to pop this battery loose so we don't accidentally short anything out when we're taking other parts off, get the hood off, and everything else. And these are probably either 1/2 inch or 9/16, but I'm betting at this point your Nova's battery terminal's not original. 1/2 inch bolt right here. I highly recommend that you get a helper for this part. Don't be stupid like me. 9/16. Here's a tip for everybody out there. Take a screwdriver, stick it in the old hole. It's going to help you from smashing this fender. What do you guys think about this? Suicide hood hinge? Maybe it's a good idea, maybe it's not. Probably shouldn't have my hand here right now. And the next thing we're going to do is pop off these hood hinge brackets. Let's pop these hose clamps off. Got a 3/8. Damn it. Since everything up here is all dry rotted and wasted anyway, we're just going to go ahead and cut to the chase. These Craftsman AccuCuts. You can buy these in Craftsman brand still. I highly suggest them. Or just go with the aftermarket ones. They work just fine too, but these things will cut everything. even your fingers. We got 4 screws on the grill, 2 in each corner here, and 2 down there that you got to get from the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and pull these out now. Grill bolts, core support bolts, and all the fender bolts are all 1/2 inch. Let's get those out. And that one's a 9/16. These 2 hood latch bolts are 3/8 on the top and 7/16 nut on the bottom. So you gotta hold this while you spin the top. This is where power tools are real nice. These 2 hood latch bolts on the back end are kind of hidden. They are for your core support attachment, which is threaded. Then you also have your wiring harness clips. This 3rd one here is just for the adjustment of that, so you can actually leave that in place and do yourself a favor. Now, before you can move on to taking your grill and other stuff off, as we get to the bottom side of this, you have to take these 2 little guys off the front for your turn signal, which is a standard number 2 Phillips. Perfect opportunity to start cleaning some of this stuff up. This one's in pretty good shape. I think we'll be able to salvage that with a little bit of rust repair. Now make sure that you pop this guy loose too. Maybe don't spray yourself with coolant when you do that. Back onto the car again. Here's something I forgot to do. You can be smarter than me when you do your swap, is drain the gas tank out. So what we've got going on right here is a jerry can on a stand, and we've got the rear fuel line for the tank just siphoning in. And I've got my thumb on this one because it's still full of gas, but I think it's all downstream. So we're gonna let this go for a little while and we'll come right back at you. Gotta save all that expensive dinosaur juice. While we're waiting on the gas tank to finish draining, we're gonna go ahead and pull off some of these front bumper bolts, and the support brackets here in the corner are 5/8 inch. So this is pretty cool. Looks like if you take out these 2 bolts and the same 2 bolts on the other side, this whole bumper gets loose and you can slide it right off. Let's see if I can do this without killing myself. We're going to take those other 2 bolts off and get the grill out. The 2 outside bolts here and here are 1/2 inch, and then there's a stand bracket with a 1/2 inch and a 7/16. We're going to pop that little guy out, take this grill off, put it up somewhere in a nice safe space where it won't get damaged, because this is pretty clean for being an original 64 grill. Sorry, did I say 7/16? I meant 3/8. Looks like there's a headlight bracket still in. Let's grab that Phillips and get those trim off. So we got to pop the headlights out too, and there's not too much to it. 3 trim screws. Make sure to put your screws back so that you can tell where they go and you don't lose them. And then there's 2 notch tabs, this guy, and only 1 that you really need to take it out. So if you take the trim off, loosen those 2, take that out, pop the headlight out, put your screw back in, tighten stuff up, make sure you don't lose it. Got our 1/2 inch back in action. I'm gonna pop these 4 screws out for the radiator and get that out of the way now. This is actually pretty cool. You can just pull this boot back on your turn signals, push and twist, and they come right out. You don't have to take the lens off or anything. So we're gonna go ahead and take this trim plate off, and we've got a screw here, here. I already took this one out. Screw here and here, and this sill will come right off. pop these mud cups off, 3/8 inch for 2, 1/2 inch for at least 2 more. Well, screwed up a little bit. Anybody got one of those for sale? Well, after that disappointing news, we're gonna take a break. Here's where we're at on time. Big thanks to Rich Andrews on the Facebook group for hooking me up with that trim piece. I screwed it up, you came through the cheap fix. I greatly appreciate it. Let's get back to work. Taking out the bolts for this fender support bracket. You got a 1/2 inch on the top and bottom. Couple more pieces to get this fender off. First being this trim. We've got a very small 5/16 right here, and then there's another bolt right in the back. We'll get to that next. So there's also a 9/16 bolt right here, and it looks like it's pretty easy to strip because it's probably pretty rusted out. Not a lot of great access, might be some more stuff that we have to cut off. Big boy. Back up top, get this fender bolt out and see if this thing comes loose. Got the bolt out, starting to come loose. Trim still staying on, so let's check that out. See what we gotta do to get that apart. So it looks like you gotta take the rest of the trim screws out and get the tire off, or get a fancy guy like this, pop in here and take those out. So let's get that going. So apparently, after you get all the other screws loose, you can pull this back and get out a little teeny tiny 5/16 screw head right there. It's probably not the best way or the right way to take that off, but that's what I did just to get the fender loose. If anybody knows the correct way to remove this trim, drop a comment down below. I'm all ears, because we gotta figure something else out for the rest of it, because that ain't happening. Screw you, pal. Power of the internet coming through again. Thank you guys, everyone in this thread, for helping me out and figuring out how these come off appropriately. There's a lot of Oklahoma dirt still holding this stuff together, which is why I was struggling. Also, never had one of these before, so this is all new to me. The suggestion is to pop it out about yay far or a little less, and then push it and tap it up. Now, I did the other side already. Good night. That thing is on there tight. So I got my little pry tool out. I'm gonna give this a couple of tappity taps up along here to help me along the way. I'm just gonna show you how much force has to go into this to get this apart. And we'll run our little 5/16 screws down here, just zipping these guys right off so that we can keep things moving. On the driver's side, it made the most sense to cut this bolt out in the back here, so we're starting to look pretty good. I'm gonna see if I can shimmy this off, or if we gotta unbolt those bolts for the mud cups. Not bad. Shimmied right off. Let's see if we can get the other side just as easy. This side's been a little more difficult. Got him. 1/2 inch. One here, one here, one here. And one bonus one right down there. We're gonna go ahead and pop these horns off real quick. And now we got the wiring harness out of the way. Let's pull out this radiator and start working on getting the core support off. Got these little teeny tiny 5/16 head bolts holding the horn relay on. And we've got one 3/8 bolt holding on this secondary circuit. Got one more ground, little 5/16 right here behind the headlight. Now we've got our wiring harness a little bit out of the way. We're gonna get the rest of these bolts out for the core support. I'm gonna pop off these crusty old boogers and get rid of them. We'll buy new ones. Try and get these things apart, see if that's going to cause any issues, and then take out these 1/2 inch bolts and nuts. There's 4 per side. You got 4 bolts, one here, 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 and here. Then you've got a bolt and a nut right there to right there. Looks like the next hurdle is fairly steep. We got 4 rivets, 2 here, 2 there. I think what we're gonna do is heat those up cherry red and take an impact gun, burp, tap the heads right off. There's 7/16, a 3/8, and a standard prong plug with a squeeze clip on the back of the alternator. That ties up with the headlight harness, turn signals, and everything else. Routes down along here and goes into this plug. Then the second plug pops off, goes to wiper motor, blower, starter, and all the junk over there. Ground strap for the firewalls, 3/8, 2 starter wires, 3/8. So we're going to take the throttle linkage cotter pin out and the clutch rod pin. And you take off both of the clutch rods for 1 in reverse and 3 in 4. Okay, we're headed inside. We're going to start taking the column out. So the next thing you want to do is disconnect your clutch rod and remove that from the car. Horn trim pops right off. 3 Phillips heads. Now, if you have an original set in here, these are probably clutch heads, which there's a specialty bit you can get, or you can get them out with a screwdriver and replace them with something like this. So we're going to remove these 3 screws for the horn trim plate and put the cover back on so we don't lose them. So Bruce wants to bring you a friendly reminder that before you get this far on your steering column and remove your horn contact, you need to disconnect your airbag circuit. 3/4 inch nut behind the steering wheel button. So we used a harmonic balancer puller to pop loose the steering wheel, and a little spring-loaded action back there too. And just so we don't lose the screws and everything, we're reassembling the steering wheel for another good home. Anybody want this thing? And then we're going to disconnect the electrical and the main harness clip off the steering column. We're going to remove these 2 bolts to get the steering column out. So you'll actually rotate your steering wheel all the way around like this to get it to slide out after you take the boot out of the firewall. And this little guy will murder you straight from the factory. Next thing we're going to do is disconnect the brakes. Obviously yours are going to be a lot different than this one. So we're taking the 2 nuts off the bolts for the trans cross member. We're going to put this back on the ground, put a floor jack under this so that when we separate it, this will go with the car. Five-eighths bolts for the trans cross member. That's why I think it's safe to say that this is probably the original front end, because there's definitely 60-some years worth of crap on here. 11/16 nut, 5/8 socket on the bolt head, and you got 8 of these on the bottom. Here's where we find out if I forgot to disconnect anything. So here's the challenge: is the steering column shaft's one piece, and if we go up, we're gonna hit that. But if we come back and up, it's gonna come out.
I'm tracking.
I think what we can do though is if we drop the front end down a little.
Shims.
Yep. Grab that big black pry bar out of the top drawer. It's coming.
Yes.
It's stuck on the trans.
Get
9-inch comes out of nowhere. Damn it!
You ready to go up?
Inside joke. Today was a good day. Woo! Bye update. So if you don't get that reference, you should go watch the Hoonigan show. It's pretty good. But we're gonna get you some timestamps here. Obviously you can see that we've done quite a bit of work, more than what the video context is. It's because about 6 months behind on editing videos. My bad. But so far we've got 4 hours to remove the front end, 3 hours or 2.5 hours later in the day, clean up motor trans and other stuff. Hour to 2.5 hours core support, motor trans dolly. 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon, just to get the disaster zone back in shape. As you can see, we've had quite a bit more progress now. Motor's back from the machine shop. Those are all the motor parts, and we're going to be getting that assembled here very, very soon, because we got to get the dummy block out of here and switch everything over and get it ready for fire. And then we'll bring it back to this and we'll start to break down what all of this stuff was. But I'm not going to bore you with video context for all of those intimate details. We're going to jump through that very quickly and make sure that we get you up to speed in 2 videos. See you next time.
Factory.
Mint!
Nobody's seen this since. This thing is in amazing shape.